I have reframed the title a little, An Atlas of Religio-Cultural Landscapes in Kullu Valley. Okay, my first intention with Kullu Valley appeared during Rural Design Studio for architecture students. I visited remote rural areas of Kullu Valley in Himachal Pradesh with students of second year for 3 consecutive years, 2009, 10 and 11. The aim of these studios was to document and analyze the vernacular architecture and technology. During these studios, we were able to map, document the geological, geographical, climatic, and to certain extent social influences on design and technology. This is an artistic expression drawn by me after a couple of visits to this place. It is almost like a miniature painting showing the completely pedestrian village, terraced linear arrangement of houses, their design, their planning, the projecting balconies, the construction technique, the materials, the stone and timber, alternating layouts of clusters of houses and agricultural fields, lifestyle of people, that is weaving, collecting wood and fodder, drying of grains, etc., and most importantly religious activities near the temple and the sacred grove. To me, this looked like nearly a cultural map of the village. While on the field, I witnessed interesting patterns of cultural behavior and religious practices, which were influencing the architecture, settlements, and the broader landscape, and vice versa. With this premise, I started observing cultural processes and especially the religious activities in the landscape. Now here, if you look at this slide, Devta is the supreme authority in this area. Devta's permission was always needed for any socio-cultural acts. No daily worship. Only on certain occasions the Devta means you can see the mask arranged in a particular way in a basket or rath, and they are brought outside in the open courtyards or sacred grove for darshan. These masks are kept in the basket in the attic, otherwise in the temple. So there is no garbhagruha kind of thing for the temple. Devta processions on certain occasions is a regular practice here. Devta visits other Devtas in the Kullu Valley, so there are kinship bonds. Like for example, Devi Jwalamukhi will come to visit Vasishtha, or Hidimba will go and meet Manu, who is her brother. So then also they visit sacred places, which are like for example, they visit Rudranath for sacred bath. They also visit villages in surrounding villages or in their own village. For example, Vasishtha will go to every house during certain festivals or melas. There were certain caste issues which were apparent. Accessing different areas in the landscape was again an issue for certain castes. If you look at your the right side of the slide, the Lohars and Harijas who play the bajas, they are restricted to a certain level in the sacred grove. But of course, without them, without their bazantry, the entire ceremony is not complete. Now, there are a lot of shamanism practices through mediums, or they are called as gurs here. There is animal sacrifice. Of course, it is on paper banned since past few years, but still last February, when I went there, I saw a couple of animal sacrifices during the melas and festivals. Now, this is one of the sections through the settlement, one village settlement, where this is just for as an example to show the caste issues. If you look at the top layer, the sacred grove and temples are located in the uppermost contour. On the intermediate contour are the upper class people. They are the Rajputs in this particular area. On the lowermost contours are the Harijans and Lohars, and at the farthest contour is the Smashan Ghat. While witnessing these religious cultural acts, I was constantly asking questions to myself, and finally I thought that the right question could be posed was, what is the significance of these religious activities in shaping of the cultural landscape of Kullu Valley, and most importantly, how do you represent it graphically? While reading through a lot of literature, I realized that what I intend to investigate would be based on two major fields of research, that is cultural landscape and sacred geography. Now, if you look at this research domain, the landscape involves nature and culture as defined by Schluter. The cultural landscape is basically the human cultural acts on the canvas of nature. Now, when you look at nature, it involves geography, geology, natural resources, climate, flora, fauna, and so on. And it is somehow expressed, or it is physically manifested through rivers, mountains, lakes, movement paths, streams, stones, trees, caves, etc. At the same time, evolution of landscape is a cultural phenomena. The culture is mediated through various factors like food, shelter, education, security and protection, political and social relations, family and other organizations, language, creative expressions such as architecture, art, etc., and most importantly, religion. When these physical features, now if you look at this particular central domain, where those physical features, they get associated with the religious activities like religious institutions, religious beliefs or religious practices, they become sacred. And here comes the sacred geography as a major field of research. Now, looking at the study area, which is Kullu Valley, I'm calling it as a Kullu Valley rather than calling it as a Kullu district, because the district, the administrative boundaries, the political boundaries, they keep on changing, but the cultural boundary which is there in the mental maps of the people over there in the local, that never change, and that is why I'm calling it as a Kullu Valley. Kullu Valley, formed by Bias, Parvati and Satluj rivers, is dotted with vernacular settlements on hilltops and hillslopes. These settlements are associated with strong mythological and historical context of different cults, either rishis, devtas or asuras. The religious activities associated with these cults are integral part of cultural life of people. These people contribute to a unifying regional landscape through their shared cultural heritage. Now here, I have, through literature, it is very evident that there are two different major categories of the cults. One is pagan, the other is classical. The pagan, the animalistic worship or the amorphous form, the symbolic worship. These cults are like Nagas, native goddesses, Mahasus, Jamlu, Rakshas, Yoginis. And the classical cults which are there, Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, or Shakti, Rishis, Pandavas, Buddhist, Kurdus. So there is a clear classification given available in literature. As you see in the upper photograph, there is a just a stone with a colorful cloth tied to it, which is a sacred place, and the lower photograph shows a clearly designed mask. Out of which, what I will be doing is I will be mapping the Saptarshis who have come to this area and their locations and their religious activities on maps. So the aim of this project is to create an atlas of socio-cultural landscapes associated with Saptarshis in Kullu Valley. Objectives: to represent the mythology and or history in a graphical format on the maps in order to contextualize the cultural significance of Saptarshis in this valley, to identify and document sacred elements related to Saptarshis in the Kullu Valley, to explore the current significance and influence of religious activities in everyday life of communities, and to map and document these observations partially. To fulfill the first objective, that is representation of mythology and history, there is a lot of literature which is involved into it. A little bit of background I'll give you here. The earlier cults of local deities dedicated to nature and forces of nature, that is pagan worship, like Rudra, Naga, they were replaced by Brahmanic deities and Vedic rishis. During Mahapralaya, Manu and the 7 rishis came in a boat till Kullu and went into penance and in various Janapadas of Kullu and appeared after some time as gods. Now these 7 rishis, namely Gautam, Bharadwaj, Vishwamitra, Jamadagni, Vasishtha, Kashyap, Atri, are worshipped in Kullu Valley as deities along with different other cults. Now here what I've done is, all these drawings and the data is in process, so it's not a complete one. But what I have tried to do is, I have listed down almost 200 cults and their devtas, out of which only these are the 6 saptarshis. Bharadwaj doesn't have a temple here, so 6 of them are found in Kullu Valley, their village, and they are not placed at only one particular village. They appear at different villages. So in all there are almost at 30 places you find the temples dedicated to rishis, the saptarshis. And if you look at the rishis, then almost 65 villages have different rishis which have been kind of manifested in that godly form. Now documenting the legends, myths and stories will be one of the important objectives here, where this particular documentation would give me the would create the cultural maps of this particular place. So something like this I'm looking at, that where you have a map which is not perfectly cartographically correct, but it tells you the story behind it, it tells you the legend, and it connects you through the history and mythology. So there will be 7 mythological maps like this and 7 historical maps like this. So now then the second objective is to identify and document the sacred elements related to saptarshis in the villages in Kullu Valley. Now the sacred geography elements are manifested in various different forms, like the shrines or dairy or temple, sacred groves, sacred trees, sacred stones, sacred water bodies, and most importantly sacred roots, which are intangible mental maps in the minds of people. Now these manifestations they appear in this particular fashion. The left hand side shows the dairy, the right is the temple of Vasishtha. Then there is a sacred grove, there is a sacred tree, there are sacred stones which are generally on the roots, and then the intangible manifestations, the sacred roots and the movements of devtas. Why does the devta move at all in the landscape? So the question is like to meet other devtas, or as a guardian of the landscape, or it's a way to boost social interaction in the people living in remote and difficult to access villages. How are these marked? Like what are the destinations, which are the halts on the way, what are the related activities on the halt or at the destination, what are the associated legends of those places, and what are the patterns of movements of these devtas, like there is a time cycle or a seasonal cycle or whatever. So all these things would be mapped. Now this is just a sample where the village Jana, the villages which are mapped in yellow, they are smaller villages than the village Jana. Jana has a little larger devta. That's not a Rishi, but I mean not one of the Saptarshis, but he's Jeev Narayan, he's also a Rishi. Now these rest of the villages, they have to pay revenue to Jana, the Rishi in Jana, so that the religious activities can be performed, or the pilgrimages of devtas can happen based on their revenue. So somehow there is a lot of interdependence of villages for religious activities per se, which is seen amongst these kind of bonds. Now this particular area which is marked in yellow and red, that is the Devta Kshetra they call us. And then there is a route which is mapped, which is a sacred route during one of the melas. I'll quickly go through religious activities, the religious institutions, religious beliefs and religious practices I'll be looking at basically. So institutions are places of worship, temple trust, religious occupations, then legends, mythology and stories, they contribute to the beliefs. Then practices are the ways of worship, life cycle events, festivals, fairs, melas, pilgrimage routes, crop calendar, cultural calendar, etc. Most of the work is involves a participant observation and in-depth interviews. Now here if you see the religious institutions, like how are they placed, how do they contribute to the natural landscape over there. Yeah, now there are few images which I'll just quickly go through. Like these are the during festival times, how the congregation of people happens, how the entire cultural landscape becomes dynamic and vibrant with the colorful people and the music. Yeah, thank you.